this is two parts here, Bob. And the first part is a reminder. And it came up on YouTube yesterday. Kay Kappa passed away. And therefore, I went to look into my video archives, which is really YouTube, and there looked at a date in which was in about 20 years ago to the day when we are in walked Carl Kappa, Kay Kappa, myself, Betty Lene, and Bob Moore into this theater, which was then not known as the Kappa Theater, soon to be known as the Kappa Theater. And you were part of the early days of the Jackson Center. And it brought a flood of memories to me. And frankly, I'd like to know, get your reflection on what it was when you and I talked, because we've known each other for a long time, kind of as you heard the concept of a Jackson Center and then became personally and professionally involved. But it dawned on me just yesterday, the Bob Moore Jackson Center connection.
Well, I've always been interested in the law. When I was a kid, I used to watch those shows like The Defenders and Perry Mason on TV, and I read about Clarence Darrow and his noble exploits, and you know, during my period of time, there were lawyers who went down south and try to protect the Freedom Riders and get people out of jail. So I viewed the law as kind of a heroic thing, you know, something that really separates us from the animals, that we've come up with our own system of justice. Everything isn't just might makes right, and that, and I'm interested in history and ideas, and I didn't know much about Jackson at the time, but I had a kind of a general view of what he had done, and I thought it was a worthwhile thing for the community, and that, and I've been a person who's been able to come up with ideas about things at various times, so I thought it would be an interesting thing to participate in and be a good thing.
You were here day one. I mean, literally. Betty Lene, Carl Kappa, Dan Bratton, Bob Moore.
Yeah.
And you were here really kind of guiding us at the early days of how to even set up the organization.
Well, that wasn't, you know, from a financial standpoint, that not a terribly complex from an accounting standpoint, but getting things set up, and but also thinking about in the long term, what were the more natural funding sources that would have an interest in the Jackson Center, because we knew eventually that the generosity of people like Carl Kappa and Betty Lene is going to start things off, but people who can donate that amount of money every year to maintain operations is going to be tougher. And I knew that that was going to be a big thing, because I've seen not-for-profits all my life. I've worked on lots of them, all kinds of them, little ones and big ones. And you know, having a funding source that, you know, if you don't have governmental funding, you really need to get something. And all the ideas of Jackson, you know, about the Holocaust and establishing international law for making rules about war, et cetera, and all these things, and how people are treated were interesting to me. And I knew Carl Kappa a little bit. I had met him at the Resource Center when he was kind of running the board of Chautauqua Community Residents, which was the precursor of support. And I'd sat across the table from him and had to tell him some, you know, things at a board meeting. And he was a powerful man at the time, but a guy who got things done, you know. So I didn't know Betty Lene as well, and I had known you for quite a while.
So we come up with this idea here we are 20 years later in the same place where you walked in with Carl Kappa and Betty. Did you get a sense in the early days, maybe some of the programs you may have learned about or even attended, as to maybe directions?
Here?
Yeah.
You know, I remember them. I remember some of the guys, and you and I went out to dinner with some of them. But I don't remember exactly what their topics were. It's that they were general history about some of them were prosecutors, participated. I don't remember their names, but they all had interesting stories. And one of the most interesting things was that you gave me a copy of Jackson's journal. Typed journal,
Yeah.
probably typed by him, I don't know, but you had a Xerox copy of it that was about 100 pages long, and that was very interesting, because he was talking about the day-to-day of setting things up, you know. So I enjoyed the programs, but I just don't remember which ones. It all blends in for things that I've read and whatnot.
I lived it, and I still have to look at a list, because it does blur after a while, let alone the timing of it all. Of course, Rehnquist, and, you know, I bet you were in the crowd that day, and part of that community reaction to it all. One of the things, Bob, and I'm just curious whether you had ever heard, because I did not, but they may have insulated me, but when you have a not-for-profit that starts off with a bang, and we did. I mean, we just had events almost day one, and Rehnquist and this, and prosecutors, and Linda Brown of Brown versus Board of Education.
Chautauqua.
Yeah. It was in April. I think about today and how we rolled the dice. Because I was at Chautauqua Sunday, and I knew the weather was going to be kind of crummy this week. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, because we literally took over the amphitheater in April. Because it wasn't open, Chautauqua wasn't open, but they cleaned it up for us, and we had 2,000 some students there. That could have been a disaster if the weather had broken. Anyways, but you had some of that stuff, and it wasn't uncommon for when you had the kind of publicity we had to have some naysayers. It ain't gonna work. You know, this is a flash in the pan. Do you recall from the community perspective, did you ever heard that?
I've been in Jamestown since the early 70s, so I'm almost a native. And one of the things I've observed about Jamestown is not so much that it's a naysayer thing, but it's a situation where I think because of a small population and a lot of lower middle or working class people in the town, there's not a lot of money here to do things. And also, there's a smaller number of people, okay? So some things that would work in a bigger city, okay, like I've given you could have a necktie store in New York City where you sold only red neckties of various, and you could probably get enough people out of, 8 or 10 million people to buy these red neckties. But in Jamestown, things that are not just common, like a grocery store or plumbing or something like that, it's a little bit difficult, you know. So I never heard any naysaying about the Jackson Center, but it's just I personally was concerned about its longevity and need to establish relationships beyond Jamestown. Chautauqua was was a wonderful thing, and also the trips you took to Europe to attempt to get the German government involved and attempt to get Jewish people involved who had an interest in the Holocaust. So my concern, I didn't hear any naysaying, but my concern was just, trying to get it to some kind of being an accountant, I was aware of the fact that, not-for-profits without a secure source of government funding can have troubles.
Well, we never had a better balance sheet than the first couple of months when we got nothing but Betty's money, Gabby's money, and
Yeah.
Carl's money, and virtually no expenses. It was a beautiful thing. I remember You probably presented it to us. It was shortly as we got started, because the money came in. We had just bought the building, but hadn't renovated anything. It was one of those, if we could just take a snapshot, it was a beautiful thing. It hasn't been quite as beautiful since, but it's good. It's a good, but,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, you've always been a muse, a sense of consciousness, and I respect that, Bob, and I appreciated all of that, and continue to do so. Because I look forward to those 2 or 3 page epistles that you send me and saying, here are some great ideas, but the point is, you're engaged.
Yeah, I really, really wanted it to succeed, but I've sent other people, epistles surreptitiously without any, I've sent them to the hospital when they had a change, and I sent them to. I had a lot of ideas early on about the city when I saw Niagara on the Lake, and I thought about the number of theatrical resources we had here that, perhaps we could get something going with a film project in the fall, which a lot of places have now, and also plays, maybe like a kind of a Mark Twain kind of a older plays, like they have at Niagara on the Lake, et cetera. So I've always been interested in, I've sent stuff to the mayor, and, I got a big mouth, but I'm a kind of a behind-the-scenes guy. I'm not, aside from running a soccer league, I've never tried to run anything. I knew you were really interested, and you were interested in ideas, and, when you see something where people are really trying hard, and you believe in it too, it's really not too hard to get involved.
Well, I thank you, and don't lose my email.
Oh, no.
And here we end this interview in the Kappa Theater, and you walked in 20 years ago when it was just being named. This is kind of coming full cycle here. Bob Moore.
Well, I didn't play a big part in it like you did, but you really got it going, and I was happy to try to, aside from the accounting part, which is pretty routine, I do for anybody, I just wanted the place to succeed, and I thought that the ideas are important because basically, if we are being visited by aliens who are coming to check on us, I think that what they are checking on is to see if we can make the transition from being the most aggressive primate on the planet to and developing technology to finding some way to have world peace and not blow each other up and not spend all our time competing with each other like we were troops of chimps fighting for territory in the jungle. And if we can get through that transition, then maybe we will be able to join the Galactic Consortium someday, and this will probably be the part you want to cut out.
All here at the Jackson Center.
So law is going to get us there. The law is what's going to get us there. And I was aware of the constraints that the Jackson Center had with, if you wanted to go after war criminals in the current sense, we have to be careful as to who we go after and who we're talking about. And I think that could, as we discussed, that could have caused problems in funding.
No question. I mean, sidebar, and is the question of advocacy versus creating an environment where the issue can be addressed. You can address it without being an advocate, which we tried to do. It's a fine line, and we're continuing to kind of deal with that issue. Is it important to talk about accountability and legal accountability? Crimes against humanity. And it was Jackson who says if you hand somebody the poison chalice, it might someday come back to you. So you got to, this is a Jackson-esque thing. So Nuremberg was, we're going to prosecute people who committed crimes against humanity, in this case, the Germans, but we are also creating a body of law which could impact ourselves.
That's right, because,
It's the old poison chalice thing. So it's not beyond the pale as to how you present that, and I know we've talked ad nauseum about this, but it's the advocacy part. Do you take a position? One versus the other, or do you let them all come, talk about it, create the environment where that can be discussed, and let the audience decide?
Well, if you're going to, if our country is going to try to spread American values, Jackson values too, and be the world's policeman, okay, which I don't think we can afford to do as much as we used to, then you have to face the fact that when you stop being the world's policeman, because you're losing your natural, this country is doing what happens to empires. We had advantages after World War II, and we're losing those advantages. We're losing manufacturing, we're losing cash flow, we're losing wealth generation, because we had everything after World War II for 25 years. When you think about it, we were the only manufacturing company of any country of any size that didn't get bombed to smithereens. Everyone was rebuilding. And so other countries are coming up, and they're going to be more involved internationally, creating more friction. And so where we withdraw from, somebody always comes in. Somebody always comes in and takes over power. If you pull yourself out, somebody else comes in and becomes more powerful. So as much as I'd like to see us reduce our military imprint all over the world, that's going to have consequences, because everything you do has consequences. So when you get older, things get so darn complicated you can't even make a decision. It's better when you're younger and you're more ignorant, and then you can just decide, we need to do this. We need to solve world hunger, without any details as to do it.
We'll get to that later, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. This has been fabulous.
It's fun.
Yeah.